So after the Constitutional Convention closed and the delegates passed the Constitution to the Articles of Confederation, Congress, people were shocked because when they first met, the agreement was that they would find a way to revise the Articles of Confederation, not just completely get rid of it and replace it. In addition, this replacement that they're proposing had a very strong central government where the states would be subordinate to the central government. This is a completely new idea because state governments came first. They were believed to represent the will of the people. Two separate factions developed. We have the Federalists who wanted the Constitution to be approved, and we have the Anti-Federalists who did not like the Constitution and felt that it got rid of democracy and created a strong tyrannical central government. So today we're going to give you an overview of their debates. First, before the Constitution would be the supreme law of the land, meaning the law for everyone, it had to go to the Confederation Congress, right? Which was the current central government of the United States. And again, from previous videos, we talked about how this government didn't really have much power. This government, though, had to look at the Constitution and agree to pass it down to the states for them to approve or not approve. And it's just really ironic because they had to look at it and think, okay, do we want to replace ourselves with this other type of government? But ultimately, with some reluctance, they went ahead and passed it to the state government. And within each state, they had to have a ratifying convention. Lawmakers and the people would meet and vote on whether they want to go ahead and ratify or approve this new constitution and this new central government. After each state were to do that, the Constitution needed 9 states for approval in order to become the supreme law of the land within those 9 states. So as you can see, there was a big hurdle for the Constitution to become the supreme law of the land. It wasn't something that just happened automatically or easily, and there was fierce debates even among revolutionary leaders. For example, Patrick Henry and Samuel Adams just read the first 3 words and they stopped and they said, "We the people." We the people. If this is going to be a government that's a federal government, shouldn't it start as we the state? What does this mean that it's going to be we the people? This reluctance on their part just reflected their fear of, is this going to be some big national blobbing government that's going to overpower everyone? And their statement reflected this popular fear even among people who approved of the Constitution. They had this fear of nationalism in a sense that there would be just one strong national government that would be directly in charge of the people. It would be really strong like a king and would have no other power that would balance it out. And even then, as you can tell from the name, right, the people that were pushing for the approval of the Constitution called themselves Federalists. They made sure to really separate themselves from the idea of nationalism. They wanted to make it clear that this new government would be federalism, that it would be a federal government where power would be shared between a strong central government and state governments who represented more of the people. So let's look at who made up both of these factions. On the Federalist side, you see people like Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, and other leaders who really saw the weakness of the Articles of Confederation and knew that it needed to be replaced. Most of them were very educated, upper-class people, the wealthy, business owners, cultured, property-owning people, for the most part. On the Anti-Federalist side, a lot of these people, though not all, tended to be more like backcountry farmers, working artisans, uneducated people, people who own debts, right? They were very much afraid that this new national government would be able to force them to pay off their debts immediately or throw them in jail. You see that there tended to be a class divide. However, not all Anti-Federalists were just poor, uneducated people. You also have very strong Anti-Federalist leaders like Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry, who were revolutionary leaders and part of this ruling class. So in a previous video, we talked about what the Federalists were worried about and why they really saw the need to replace the Articles of Confederation. Now let's talk about what the Anti-Federalists feared. So consistent among all the state conventions, whenever they debated the Constitution, they were really afraid that there was not a place in the Constitution that guaranteed individual freedoms. They were afraid that this strong central government would trample on the freedoms of the people. Now, on the Federalist side, they just felt that, okay, well, the Constitution has these enumerated powers, meaning powers that are specifically written on the Constitution itself as to what the government can do. So that means there are powers, right, that are not on the Constitution that the government cannot do. And so they said that in itself is limiting, right? That's the point of a constitution, where you write down rules to limit the government. The Federalists also felt that there was enough of a checks and balances between the three branches so that they wouldn't become such a strong, overpowering, overbearing, tyrannical type of government. But as you may know, the Anti-Federalists won out on this one when they said that regardless of all that, all those limitations of the government within the Constitution, if people truly did have rights, shouldn't whatever constitution in a republic, right, a representative government, that's what a republic is, that's what they're trying to create here, a government that's representing the people. They're saying that any government that is a republic should have the rights of the people written down so that the people may know what their rights are. In addition, Anti-Federalists were very worried because there were no annual elections of representatives. They were also afraid because this constitution was creating basically a national stronghold that is 10 square miles, which is what Washington, D.C. is today. They were afraid of this national stronghold. They were afraid that there would be a standing army, that a powerful executive would be in charge of, and an executive who was not directly elected by the people. They were also worried because there was an omission of any reference to God in this constitution. And finally, they were worried that only 2/3 of the state needed to approve it in order for the Constitution to become the supreme law. So then this public debate waged between Federalists and Anti-Federalists, and they debated in person. They also debated on paper through newspapers and pamphlets. Heated debates happened within each state conventions. Eventually, though, the Constitution was approved. 4 small states, seeing the advantages they had in this new government, approved right away. Pennsylvania's convention ratified it after the Federalists physically forced 2 Anti-Federalists to be present so that there would be enough people there to vote. The Massachusetts Convention, a stronghold of Anti-Federalists, narrowly ratified the Constitution, but only after the promise that there would be a Bill of Rights added to it. New Hampshire approved the Constitution after the convention actually adjourned, and Federalists were able to convince their Anti-Federalist colleagues who were on the fence to go ahead and switch sides and vote for the Constitution. Eventually, on June 21st, 1788, the Constitution was adopted by 9 states. The holdouts were Virginia, New York, North Carolina, and Rhode Island. In Virginia, the Anti-Federalists, represented by the fiery Patrick Henry, were narrowly defeated by the Federalists with a vote of 89 to 79. New York was a holdout state, and a lot of historians believe it's because they actually had a more democratic system of choosing people to go to the convention, and they had allowed non-land-owning men to vote. However, it was in this state that the Federalist Papers were published in newspapers as separate essays. And in these essays, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison, who signed their names as Publius, basically created a very strong defense of the Constitution. And so eventually New York did approve the Constitution. So why is it that the Federalists won over Anti-Federalists? Well, I think the most obvious answer is the Anti-Federalists didn't really have an alternative option that they presented. They just poked holes at the Constitution and presented criticisms without presenting a valid option to the Articles of Confederation, which was obviously an ineffective form of government. In addition, the Federalists had more organization and they had a national perspective of things. They weren't just focused on getting the Constitution approved within their own states. They were trying to get it approved throughout the whole country, so they had a more organized campaign. And finally, there was also that compromise, right? They decided to compromise and added the Bill of Rights to the Constitution, and that's those first 10 amendments that guaranteed individual freedoms. And so that was just a very quick overview of this whole ratification process. I hope it's been helpful. I'll see you all in the next video.